Good evening.
Good evening.
We're continuing with our study of how Christians worship. We have 3 more sessions on the subject. Part 12 is tonight. We've looked at worship all this time as a drama, that we are all actors on the stage, that it is for an audience of one, King Jesus. That's what we do. We come together and offer him the drama, the theater of our thanksgiving for what God has done for us in Christ Jesus. Tonight, I'm calling tonight's talk Sacramental Thinking. And I would like to begin by comparing it to the actor's job of getting in character. I was forbidden to go to movies when I was a child. It was a sin. And so even when other kids in our church would go to movies, I was the preacher's kid and it was a sin and we couldn't go to movies. One moment. Trish just reminded me that the air conditioner was on and it picks up on the audio, so y'all can thank her. So I couldn't go to movies. Movies were a sin. The first movie I went to was in 1977, August 2nd, 1977, where Shirley and I snuck into Star Wars in Dallas, hoping no one would see us, lest the word get back that we'd gone to a movie. So once I got free from that mindset, I started, as the poem says, I started making up for the sobriety of my youth, and I fell in love with theater and movies and acting, and it's a fascinating world to me. A good actor getting into character is a fascinating thing too, and I'm just going to talk about one. Robert De Niro. When Robert De Niro made the movie Taxi Driver in 1976, it's about a kind of deranged taxi driver in New York City. When De Niro made that movie, he did a deep study of mental illness, but for a month, he took a 12-hour-a-day shift as a taxi driver in New York City. I mean, can you imagine getting into the cab? Where are you going to go? 5th and 3rd. Oh, it's Robert De Niro driving me around. But for a month, De Niro did that to get into character. And some actors just go all out getting into character. Audie Murphy, probably most of you here know who Audie Murphy was. Audie Murphy was the most decorated soldier, American soldier in World War II. And he's just from right over here, Kellogg, Celeste area around Greenville. He wrote an autobiography called To Hell and Back, and Hollywood wanted to make a movie of the autobiography, and they wanted Audie Murphy to star in the movie. And at first he refused, and he said, no, Tony Curtis needs to play me. And they finally talked him into it. And when you think about it, Audie Murphy didn't have to do too much work to get into character, because he was playing himself. I mean, it would require some, but he was playing himself. Well, as actors in the theater of worship, we too are playing ourselves. We have a role to play before the Lord in this drama of thanksgiving, but that's also the role we are called to be living out every day, every minute of our lives. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. So you can't present your body until you present your mind. So Paul also talks about being renewed, being transformed by the renewing of our minds. And so we have to get mentally in character to play the character, not only in worship, but every day of our lives, to play the character that God has called us to be. In other words, all that to say, how you think matters. It matters about how you live, and it matters about how you worship. If you ask a typical person, how should Christians think? Almost always the discussion goes to two things: morals and doctrine. Well, here's how you ought to think about the Trinity. Here's how you ought to think about whatever else. And here's how you ought to think about sex. And here's how you ought to think about drugs. And here's how you ought to think about stealing and murder. So those are kind of the two categories that we tend to go to when we talk about Christian thinking. There are tons of books out there, including 4 or 5 that I've written, about doctrine and behavior. But I would like to take it to a different place tonight when we talk about how Christians think. I'm not talking for the moment about what we think. I'm talking about how we think. And I would call this sacramental thinking. Now, to speak of the sacraments is automatically to move beyond the realm of logic, beyond the realm of understanding, of comprehension, and to step into the realm of faith. The very term sacrament means mystery. It's a mystery. Embrace the mystery. So I'm going to give you a couple of classic definitions of sacrament. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. That's kind of the standard Protestant version of a definition of a sacrament. The 39 Articles of the Anglican Church says, and I'm quoting the Old English, the sacraments, not only badges or tokens of Christian men's profession, but rather they be certain sure witnesses and effectual signs of grace and God's goodwill toward us, by which he doth work invisibly in us, and does not only quicken, but also strengthen and confirm our faith in him. So that's Anglican doctrine. But there's that phrase, the effectual sign. Effectual means it makes something happen. Effectual means it's not just a symbol. There's a reality contained in that symbol. When I say we, I'm talking about the tradition I grew up in, the Protestant tradition. We have so focused on the cerebral. It's very important for us on our signs to have Dr. So-and-so is the pastor, because that means he went to such and such a school and got such and such a degree, and he's intellectually qualified to be the doctor, because it's about thinking, it's about smarts. Historically, and in the Catholic tradition, it's about mystery. It's about mysticism almost. It is about a mystical participation with God in our lives. So Paul says to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 16, is not the cup of thanksgiving a participation in the blood of Christ? The Greek word koinonia, a true sharing in. Paul, the apostle, this is not, 400 years later theology developing. This is the apostle Paul writing into the Corinthians. Is not the cup that we drink of a participation in the blood of Christ, and is not the bread that we break a participation in the body of Christ? So Paul is teaching them that the sacraments, yes, they are symbols, but they are so much more than symbols. They are symbols that contain the reality they symbolize. Peter says it this way in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4. He talks about these things which have spiritual power. Through these, God has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate, koinonia, in the divine nature and escape the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. So Paul and Peter both are calling us to participate, not just learning about, not just having our theology, not just having our facts, not just keeping the rules, but a real, genuine participation in God himself. I did a podcast interview this week with a pastor from Philadelphia. He's going to be on in about 3 weeks. From an Anabaptist and Mennonite tradition. And he was interviewing me about a couple of books, the Hell book that I wrote and the Salvation book. And one of the things that we talked about on this podcast is salvation is not dying and going to heaven. That's what we've made it. Do you know where you'll spend eternity when you die? No, salvation is about participating with God so that he transforms us to be like him, to be in union with him. And heck, that's what heaven is. And that's what we look forward to in the future, is everything being brought into union, that beautiful union and participation with God. Not just me and you and everybody else, but the trees and the rocks and the streams and the planets and everything. Participation with God. Unfortunately, a lot of modern day Christians have lost the sense of mystery in their lives and in their faith. We live in a very materialistic age. We live in an age that says, show me the facts, prove it to me, make it scientifically understandable to me, so I can study it and dissect it and rationally comprehend this thing. And if I can't, I won't accept it. I won't believe it. Just leave it alone. The early church, rather, here's a great phrase from the early church. This is the idea they embraced: faith seeking understanding. We're in a culture that does it exactly the opposite of that. If I can understand it, I'll believe it. The early church was, we'll believe it. We have the rest of our lives trying to understand it. We will embrace it by faith and grow in our understanding of it. So at the foundation of that is a kind of mysticism, a kind of trust in something we don't fully understand. One of the problems that has emerged from this empirical way of understanding that we live in our culture is that Christians have embraced that, and in line with that have embraced a literalist reading of Scripture. Now, I'm all for literal reading of the Scripture if that part of the Scripture is meant to be read literally. But when the Psalms, which is a book of poetry, when the Psalms talk about God gathering us under his wings, we do not therefore conclude that God has wings like a chicken. When the book of Revelation describes a seven-headed beast emerging out of the sea, we're not actually expecting a seven-headed beast to be coming out of the sea. This is symbolic language, and the Bible is full of symbolic language. Even the story of Adam and Eve. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I just want to use it as an example. The story of Adam and Eve plucking the fruit Apple? Banana? I'm right now I'm kind of going with kumquat, but I don't know what. But the fruit. They plucked a fruit and ate it. And literalists spend an awful lot of energy on that when that's not the point. The point isn't that they ate fruit. The point is they broke a commandment of God. They were disobedient to God. The point is that tree, that fruit, becomes a symbol of the opportunity for obedience or disobedience. And if we just look at the surface, oh, he ate an orange and therefore God cursed him, we miss the point completely. So the Bible is not to be approached in that empirical, prove it to me and then I'll believe it. Rather, faith-seeking understanding, and every text I come to, I'm going to read it in light of the mystery behind it, the message behind it, the real issue behind it. So think about this. The Bible, the story of the people of God, is full of symbols that contain the reality they symbolize. That tree is a good place to begin. The Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, the temple, the bronze serpent that was lifted up, and if the people would look on it, they would be healed. All of these were symbols. The vestments, even the incense used in the Old Testament, all of these things were symbols that somehow contained the reality that they symbolized. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, but before I do, I'm going to take a short little detour and talk to you about the power of symbol itself. And maybe we've talked about this because this is an intriguing thing to me. As human beings, the only way we communicate is through symbols. The only way. You can't communicate with another human being except through symbol. Now, watch, I'll give you an example. Think of a man wearing a blue shirt. Got it? A man wearing a blue shirt. Now, I want you to notice what just happened. I created an image in your brain of a man wearing a blue shirt by using three words: MANBLUESHIRT. Those are just symbols. The letters are just symbols. The letters on a book that you read are just black symbols on a white page that you've come to understand what those symbols mean. Words are symbols. Every word you use, whether spoken or written, is a symbol. The words that come out of everything I'm saying right now, every word coming out of my mouth is a symbol that you are hearing and understanding and translating and somehow absorbing. Stop sign. S-T-O-P. Color red. Octagonal. It's a symbol. Have you ever driven? I'm not talking about France or Germany where the words on the sign are still letters that we recognize. Have you ever driven like in Morocco or in Asia where the letters make absolutely no sense at all? I mean, you can kind of figure out, oh, that's a stop sign in Germany, but not in Morocco, because you don't know the language, you don't know the symbols, you don't know what they mean. They don't communicate to you. Symbolism. It's the only way that we communicate. Sacraments are symbols. Powerful symbols. Symbols that not only represent the unseen reality, but they convey the unseen reality. They deliver what they represent. They effect the reality they symbolize. They are therefore efficacious. They are effective symbols of what they communicate. I'm going to spend the next two sessions talking about two of them, baptism and the Eucharist. I'm going to finish out tonight talking about the way we think sacramentally. To develop a thoroughly biblically and historically Christian way of sacramental thinking, there are three things that we need to establish as a foundation. And I'm going to run through them quickly. Thing number one, God made matter. Now, there's been a heresy that has crept in and out of the church since the beginning. And, buddy, it's crept in our day. There is a heresy that has crept in the church that says matter doesn't really matter to God. In fact, our goal is kind of to get free from matter. Our salvation is when we die and go to heaven. We get out of this old body and we die and go to heaven. And this old world, it's going to be blown to kingdom come before it's all said and done. It's like matter doesn't matter. Stuff doesn't matter. God, it was only incidental. What he's really concerned about is our spirit life, and that's simply not Christian. But that has permeated the Christian church. Matter matters. God made it out of within the space that is himself. God brought forth stuff, dirt, water, fire, wind, trees, sushi. I mean, I don't know, everything. He brought forth stuff. And he said, it's good. And when he was finished with everything, he said, it's very good. God himself, it's very good. The material world is a blessed and good thing. That's the first thing we've got to understand. I hope this is finding a place in your mind, a spot to sit. God made matter. Secondly, God joined matter. He joined himself to matter. When Jesus was conceived in the womb of the Virgin Mary, before he even had developed fingers or heart or eyes or form, in the womb of the Virgin Mary, the Holy Spirit joined God with human flesh. And even in that single cell that existed, you had the union of the created and the uncreated. And that single cell grew for 9 months into a little baby boy and was born to the Virgin Mary. And that child that was born is fully God and fully man, not for 33 years and then he takes off the man suit and goes back to being God. No, he joined himself forever to humanity. But watch this. He joined himself not only to humanity, but because humanity is part of matter, part of creation, the pinnacle of creation, but part of stuff. Because of that, God has forever joined himself to stuff, to matter, to creation. Which leads Paul to say, in him we live and move and have our being. God made matter. God joined himself to matter in order to redeem all matter. And here's the third point. God uses matter. He used the body of the Virgin Mary. He used the egg of the Virgin Mary. He used bread and wine and water to convey grace, to convey his very presence, to convey himself. So if we're going to think sacramentally, it has to be on this foundation of, oh, God uses stuff. That means God can use any stuff, really. God can use a bird flying by to speak to you. God can use a leaf falling from a tree in the fall to reveal something to you. There are 1,000, 10 million ways that God can use stuff to speak to you. But I'm going to narrow it down now and talk about not sacramental thinking, but sacramental things. And then we'll be finished. God created it. God joined himself to it. God uses it. Matter, stuff. Having said that, then, God can use anything he wants as a vehicle of his grace. In the Bible, in the Bible, God used a shadow. He used a handkerchief that had been blessed. Holy oil. There are all kinds of things in the Bible that get used. Those things are called by the church not sacraments, but sacramentals. Holy water, holy oil. There are a variety of things that can be blessed. Sign of the cross. It's a sacramental. It's something that God, it's a symbol that God uses to bless us. We can make it ourselves. Martin Luther, the great father of the Protestant Reformation, said, first thing you need to do when you get up out of bed is make the sign of the cross as a shield of faith over yourself. But sacramentals and sacraments do not occur willy-nilly. So what this next thing I'm going to share with you is only going to take a minute, but it's a little bit technical. Classically defined, a valid sacrament requires three things. And this is seminary discussion, not Saturday night discussion, but I'm going to say it anyway. A valid sacrament requires proper form. In other words, the right persons, the right words, the right prayers, the right structure of the moment. It requires proper matter, the right stuff, water, wine, bread, oil. You don't use Pepsi and Tic Tacs for communion. Proper form, proper matter, and proper intent. The right reason and intention. A sacrament doesn't just accidentally happen. You know, a Christian pushes somebody in the water and they're baptized. No, the intent has to be there. So having said that, the church recognizes 7 sacraments. 7 sacraments. 2 of them, called the dominical sacraments, established by Christ. 5 of them, the ecclesial sacraments, the seed of them in the ministry of Christ, but established by the church. The 2 chief sacraments are baptism, which I'm going to talk about next time, and that's our entry into the people of God, our ordination into the priesthood of all believers, our membership, the way we get into the Actors Guild to worship the Lord, the sacrament of baptism, and then the sacrament of Holy Communion, in which we participate in the body and blood of Jesus, eating and drinking life into ourselves, forgiveness into ourselves, healing into ourselves, God into ourselves. And then the 5 lesser, if it's legal to call them lesser, the 5 ecclesial sacraments are confirmation, holy matrimony, ordination, reconciliation or confession and absolution, and unction or anointing with oil. Those round out the 7 sacraments. But those are the 7 that we recognize. When you start thinking sacramentally, you will see this at play everywhere. You will see God start showing you glimpses of himself in 1,000 different ways through stuff, including through other people made of stuff. Which will bring us to the conclusion, really, in short, that for a Christian, all of life is sacramental. You don't have a secular life and then you give these 4 hours or 3 hours a week or whatever to being spiritual. You have a life infused with God, and you're called to live that life 24/7 for his glory and for his honor and in union with him, with the joy of the Lord being your strength. And when you do that, then everything becomes sacramental because you just think that way. And you'll come back talking, telling, let me tell you how I saw God this week. Let me tell you how I encountered the Lord this week. Because it is through things and symbols that God communicates and accomplishes his purposes. Amen.
Amen.
For you Phoenix people, I did not end abruptly.